Welcome, dear brave listener. You're tuning in to Careful TV, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're tuning in during the day or late at night, thank you for choosing to spend a part of your time with me. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. I never thought I'd be one of those people who tells a story like this. I've heard a million of them. Bad Airbnb experiences, creepy hosts, strange setups that don't match the listing. But I always figured those were outliers. I travel a lot for work and tend to book places last minute, so I've stayed in my fair share of weird setups. Shared bathrooms, questionable neighborhoods, unwashed linens. You get used to it. This one happened back in March. I was in Louisville for a week to help my cousin move into a new apartment. She's got 2 kids and a bad back, and since I work remotely, I figured I'd lend a hand while still getting some work done during the day. My name's Jess, by the way. I'm 32 and live in Minneapolis, but I was born and raised in Kentucky, so I know the area well. That's probably what made me feel too comfortable to second-guess things. My cousin offered to let me crash at her place, but between boxes everywhere, her ex coming in and out to drop things off, and the general chaos of 2 toddlers running around, I decided to book a cheap Airbnb nearby. I didn't need anything fancy, just a clean bed, decent Wi-Fi, and my own space. The listing looked okay. A small guest suite attached to a main house in a quiet suburb with private entrance, bathroom, and kitchenette. Price was low, reviews were few but positive, and the photos made it seem plain but livable. I got there around 5 p.m. on a Thursday. The host, an older man named Bill, was supposed to meet me to hand off the keys. The neighborhood looked peaceful, trees lining the streets, bird feeders in every front yard, that kind of place. But Bill didn't show up on time. I waited outside the house for nearly 40 minutes, suitcase by my side, debating whether to message him again or just look for a hotel. Just as I pulled out my phone to cancel, a dusty green pickup rolled into the driveway. He got out, clearly flustered, and immediately launched into an apology. Said he'd been out fishing with a buddy and didn't realize how late it had gotten. Then, laughing a little too hard, he admitted they'd had a couple of beers, and he maybe shouldn't have driven back so fast. He said, "Don't put that part in your review, all right?" Like it was some kind of inside joke. I smiled politely, but I wasn't really amused. He showed me around the guest suite. It was on the back side of the house, separated by a wooden gate and a narrow concrete path that led to its own door. The interior was fine. A little dated, kind of musty with faded rugs and too many fake plants, but not dirty. The windows were small and high on the walls, giving it a basement feel even though it was technically ground level. There was a tiny kitchenette, a bathroom with cracked tile, and a single bedroom with an old wooden bed and 2 mismatched chairs pushed against the wall. He pointed out a door at the back of the kitchenette and said, "That stays locked. Leads to the main house, but it's sealed off." I nodded. I'd seen reviews mention it, but didn't think much of it. I assumed it was like a laundry room or storage area. Then he handed me his cell number and said it'd be easier to text than message through Airbnb. Once he left, I unpacked a little and headed over to my cousin's. We had dinner, sorted boxes, and I got back around 10. I was pretty tired, so I changed into sweats, made some tea, and sat on the bed answering work emails. That's when I heard it. A knock. Not on the front door, the one I came in through, but from somewhere closer. It was soft like knuckles against drywall. Then I heard my name. "Jess?" It came from the back of the kitchenette. I froze. Before I could respond or even stand up, I heard a key turning in the lock. That locked door. And then, like it was no big deal, the knob turned and in stepped Bill. "Hey, sorry, I think I left my phone in here earlier," he said, already moving into the space. I stared at him, still sitting on the bed, trying to process what was happening. He didn't wait for an answer. He started glancing around, opening the cabinet near the sink, looking under a chair. I told him I hadn't seen a phone, but he kept talking, saying he was sure he left it in here. He's always losing it. His wife used to joke about it before she passed. I didn't know how to react. My brain was stuck between politeness and alarm. He eventually gave up, said sorry to bother you, and backed out the door. But he didn't apologize for using a key. He didn't ask if it was okay to come in. He just acted like it was still his space. I sat there for a long time trying to calm down. Nothing had happened, technically. But the way he'd entered, like it was his right, not a favor, made my stomach twist. I kept thinking, if I had been in the shower or undressed or asleep, he would have just walked in anyway. I didn't feel right showering after that, but I knew I had to eventually. So I did it quick, locking the bathroom door out of instinct, which I never normally do when I'm alone. Every sound made me jump. When I got out, I dried off in the bathroom and dressed before stepping back into the room. That's when I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. The chairs. There were 2 in the bedroom. One of them had ropes tied around the armrests. Not decorative rope or anything nautical. It looked like someone had wrapped basic nylon rope around each armrest, not securing them to anything, just coiled there like it had a purpose once and someone forgot to untie it. I stared at it for way too long. My logical brain told me it was probably nothing. Maybe he used the chair in the yard to tie something down. Maybe it was left over from moving stuff, but something about seeing it in that quiet moment after everything else felt wrong. Like seeing someone's fingerprint on your phone when you know you didn't touch it. I debated leaving right then, but it was nearly midnight and I didn't have anywhere to go. Every hotel nearby was either booked or way out of my price range for a walk-in. So I tried to make the room feel safer. I shoved both chairs against the inner door, looping the rope loosely between the handles. It didn't really do anything. The door opened inward and there was no way to block the handle, but it made me feel like I'd at least hear if someone tried again. Still, I couldn't sleep. I laid on top of the sheets, fully dressed, phone in hand, refreshing local hotel listings every 10 minutes. I kept replaying the moment he entered, the way he didn't pause, the way he looked around like it was still his. I thought about texting him to say it wasn't okay, but I worried that might escalate things. I thought about leaving a bad review, but worried it'd trigger something worse. And worst of all, I started doubting myself. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I overreacted. But then I remembered something my mom used to say when I moved out at 18. You don't wait for something to go wrong to leave. You leave when it feels off. So I called my cousin. She didn't even ask questions, just said, "Where are you? I'm coming." She picked me up 10 minutes later, pajamas under a jacket, toddler asleep in the back seat. I left the keys on the table and didn't look back. The chairs were still stacked by the door. I didn't report it. I probably should have, but I did leave a review. Nothing dramatic, just the facts. The host entered without permission. There was a locked door with access to the suite. It made me uncomfortable. Maybe nothing would have happened. Maybe he really was just looking for his phone. But I wasn't about to take that risk. So I wasn't even planning on sharing this to the channel originally, but I've been catching up on your Airbnb stories while packing this morning, and it kind of made something click. I kept thinking about how subtle some of the stories are, how it's not always some movie-level twist, just small things stacking up until your brain won't let it go. I guess that's what happened to me. It's not dramatic, not traumatic, but it was enough to rattle me in a way I wasn't expecting. I still think about it, and that's why I figured it's worth putting out there. Anyway, I'm Mike. I'm 33, live just outside Denver, and I work remote full-time for a logistics software company. It's not glamorous, but it gives me the flexibility to travel, and I try to take advantage of that when I can. This particular trip wasn't a vacation. It was more of a family obligation. My cousin Rob called me up in mid-April asking if I could fly out to Sacramento to help clean out his late aunt's house. She passed away earlier this year, and most of her things had just been sitting in boxes untouched. Rob's mom, my actual aunt, is too old to handle the heavy lifting, and his wife had just had their second kid, so I offered to come help. Rather than stay at a family member's already crowded house, we figured we'd get a short-term rental nearby. Somewhere with enough space for Rob, his 12-year-old son, and me. We found this 3-bedroom ranch-style place on Airbnb just outside the city. Quiet neighborhood, affordable rate, fenced backyard, which was great for my dog, and pictures that made it look clean and recently renovated. It even had these little modern touches: sliding barn doors, exposed beams, minimal furniture, Edison bulb fixtures. Looked like it had been made for Instagram more than anything else. We checked in on a Wednesday afternoon. No host contact, just a lockbox and a code. First impression was that the place looked exactly like the photos, which is rare in my experience. But the longer we stood inside, the more we started to pick up on small things. Not broken stuff necessarily, just things that didn't feel intentional. Like the light switch near the kitchen that didn't control anything. Or the fake plants that still had price tags underneath. One of the chairs had a tag too. It felt like someone bought everything in a single trip to Target and called it a day. But what really stood out right away were the doors. There weren't any traditional doors inside the house. All the bedrooms, the bathroom, even the laundry room, every single one used these barn-style sliders. I've stayed in places with those before and don't hate the aesthetic, but here, none of them had bottom floor tracks or guides. You could push them from the inside and they'd rock or lift off the wall if you weren't careful. No way to lock them, obviously. Just these wide, floating panels that offered the illusion of privacy without any real function. That didn't bother Rob or his son. They just picked rooms and moved in. But I'm a light sleeper and kind of particular about privacy. The door thing didn't sit great with me, especially at night. Still, I didn't say anything. I figured it was a design choice and I could live with it for a few days. That night, I was brushing my teeth when I noticed a weird little detail in the hallway. There was this tiny circular hole in the drywall, about the size of a marble, just up above ankle height. At first, I assumed it was damage, maybe someone moved furniture and bumped the wall. But the hole was too clean. No jagged edges, no drywall dust, just a smooth circle that went clean through. I crouched and looked into it. The hole lined up directly with my bedroom. You could see across the hall, right into the space where my bed was. It caught me off guard. I stood up, checked around, and noticed another similar hole behind the laundry room door. Same size, same angle. It made me feel something I hadn't felt in a while. Watched. That night, I left the hallway light on. I woke up around 1:30 in the morning, not because of noise, just that kind of vague unease that makes your body wake you up before your brain knows why. I laid there for a minute trying to go back to sleep, and then I heard it. Movement. It came from above me. The ceiling. Soft creaking, like someone walking slowly or shifting their weight. Not rats, not squirrels, too heavy and too paced. It wasn't random thumping, it was a sequence of small, careful steps. There was an attic hatch in the laundry room. I'd noticed it earlier but didn't think much of it. Just one of those rectangular panels with a little pull cord. It didn't have a built-in ladder, and we didn't bring a step stool, so I couldn't get up there if I tried. I stood under it for a few minutes anyway, flashlight in hand, just listening. The movement stopped. I walked back to my room, closed the barn door slowly, and sat on the edge of the bed. Then I heard a tapping sound, just a soft tick from the ceiling corner. Then another, closer to the wall. I don't want to overstate it. I wasn't terrified or anything, but I was very, very aware of how little I knew about the house I was staying in. Who built it, who rented it before us, what might have been left behind. What helped was Lucy, my dog. She's a massive, brindle-colored rescue, part mastiff and probably part horse based on her size. She was curled up near my bed, breathing slow and steady, completely unbothered. If anything had been seriously wrong, she would have been the first to know. That comforted me more than I expected. Still, I barely slept the rest of the night. The next morning, I texted the host. I didn't want to sound like a lunatic, so I kept it simple. Mentioned the movement sounds above the ceiling, and that there were some oddly placed holes in the drywall that might need attention. To my surprise, the host called within 10 minutes. His name was Brent. He sounded maybe mid-40s. Friendly, but clearly caught off guard. "Yeah, so," he said, "I really should have mentioned this earlier. We had a long-term guest about 6 months ago who got a little unhinged." He went on to explain that the guy had been drilling into walls, claiming he was setting up some kind of elaborate speaker system. Brent hadn't realized how many holes the guy made until guests started pointing them out. He thought he'd patched them all. If you're seeing new ones, that's totally on me. Then he said, and the attic thing, man, I hoped we were done with that raccoon. I froze a little. He continued, they were getting in last winter through a vent on the side of the roof. We sealed it up, but I guess something's still up there. I can swing by this afternoon with a ladder if you want to check it out together. An hour later, Brent showed up in a black pickup with a dented ladder strapped to the bed. He looked exactly like his voice sounded. Dad jeans, windbreaker, casual posture. He apologized again for the weirdness, helped me set up the ladder, and I volunteered to go up. I climbed into the attic, flashlight in hand. The space was dusty, cramped, full of blown insulation and forgotten wiring. Near one of the rafters sat a large raccoon just curled up on a blanket of fiberglass. It stared at me without flinching. We both just kind of looked at each other like, yeah, this tracks. I came down, told Brent, and he nodded. Persistent bastard, he muttered. He promised to call animal control and get it handled. I pointed out the holes again in person, and he took pictures saying he'd cover them properly. He also refunded a night of our stay without me asking. That went a long way, honestly. Rob didn't know any of this happened. He was out with his kid all morning grabbing stuff from his aunt's garage. I kept it to myself because there wasn't really anything to say. It was fine. The raccoon was real. The holes had a story. Brent wasn't sketchy. It was just weird. Still, that night I slept with one eye open. Not literally, but that's what it felt like. I wasn't scared, but I was hyper aware of every shift in the walls, every floorboard that creaked. I kept thinking about how easy it is to feel safe somewhere that isn't really yours. You open the front door with a code you didn't set. You sleep under ceilings you've never seen in daylight. You lock a sliding door with no latch and hope the Airbnb photos were truthful. It's trust. Every stay is built on it. And once something small breaks that trust, a sound you can't explain, a hole that shouldn't be there, it's hard to get it back. We stayed the rest of the week without incident. No more attic noises. Lucy stayed calm. Brent messaged again to confirm the raccoon had been removed. I left a neutral review. Didn't want to burn him, but didn't sugarcoat it either. It's funny. I've stayed in dozens of Airbnbs. I've dealt with bad plumbing, loud neighbors, even one guy who forgot he had double booked his guest house. But this was the first time I felt like I was being observed, like someone or something had been watching the space longer than I had, and I was just borrowing it for a few nights. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's hard to explain the feeling any other way. Would I stay in an Airbnb again? Yeah, probably. But I've started bringing a headlamp and duct tape in my travel bag now, just in case. And I always check the ceiling. I don't think I'll ever forget the first time I saw the flyer. It was taped to the side of the bus shelter on 28th and Fruitridge, held up by strips of sun-faded masking tape that barely clung to the glass. Alyssa's face was right in the middle, grainy and a little pixelated like it had been cropped from a Facebook post. But even then, even in black and white, you could tell she was smiling. It hit me harder than I expected. I'd been trying to keep busy that whole week, driving around, checking alleyways, motels, corner stores, repeating the same half-scripted questions to clerks and cashiers who barely looked up from their phones. I kept telling myself that I was helping, that we were going to find her. But that flyer, that was the first time I let it register that she was gone. That's when I stopped saying when she comes back. That's when I started saying if. I'm Sierra, Alyssa's cousin. We were close, closer than most family. She used to sneak out of her house and crash on our couch when things got too loud at home. We'd stay up late watching movies, painting our nails, smoking cigarettes on the back steps. She had this laugh that made you think everything was going to be fine, even when it wasn't. She was 24 when she went missing. We both were. The last time I saw her was 2 days before it happened. She swung by my place to borrow a charger, then stayed for dinner. She was tired, said work was wearing her down and her cousin was getting on her nerves, but she still smiled through most of it. Told me she was thinking about going out that weekend. Nothing big, just a party with Dana and some of her co-workers. I remember telling her to be careful, and she gave me that look like I was overreacting. I'll be fine, Sai. Promise. She always said that. Friday night, she went to that Airbnb in Elk Grove, some generic 2-story in a quiet subdivision. Dana's coworker had booked it for the weekend, and people were coming in and out all night. Alyssa had posted a story on Instagram, a boomerang of her spinning around in the kitchen with a solo cup in her hand. That was the last thing anyone saw from her account. By Saturday morning, she was gone. Her mom, Aunt Val, called me in a panic around 11:30 a.m. She said Alyssa hadn't come home, that she hadn't shown up to work her shift at the dental clinic. Her phone was off. Dana didn't know where she was. I threw on clothes and drove straight to Val's house. She was pacing in the living room, her phone in one hand, a printed out call log in the other. She kept saying over and over, she wouldn't do this, she wouldn't. Val had gotten 2 missed calls that morning around 5 a.m. from a number she didn't recognize. She hadn't answered, thought it might be a scam. When she called back, a man picked up, said Alyssa was asleep. When Val asked where they were, he said Alyssa had gone to the store. Then he hung up. That was it. No name, no address, just static on the other end. We didn't know it then, but Alyssa had already called 911 hours earlier. The dispatcher transcript said she was at a gas station, Shell on Bruceville Road, said she didn't know where she was, said the guy she'd been with threw her stuff out and drove off with her phone. She wasn't injured, just stranded, alone, scared. She asked for help. The officer didn't get there until 4:20 a.m. By the time he arrived, she was gone again. The clerk told him she left with another customer. A man, calm, clean-cut, gray Camry. He said they looked like they knew each other. Alyssa had no way to contact anyone, no way to check directions, call a ride, or ping her location. Just gone. Justin, the guy who took her to the bar that night, told police they argued and that he left her at the gas station around 3:30. Said he left her phone on the seat. That made no sense. Why would she call 911 from the store's phone if she had hers? He said he didn't know what happened after that she seemed fine. She wasn't fine. We started posting flyers that afternoon. Me, Val, Aunt Kendra, and a few of Alyssa's friends from work. We split up into pairs and canvassed Elk Grove, South Sac, and Meadowview. Laundromats, gas stations, bus stops, anywhere that might have had a camera or a clerk who remembered her face. The Shell station clerk told me the man Alyssa left with was a regular, that he came back 2 days later and asked them to take the flyers down, said they were bothering his family. And they did. They actually did. That's when it stopped feeling random. People started talking. There were whispers of a motel off Stockton that Alyssa had been seen at. Budget Inn, room 209. Someone said she was with a guy and that she looked dazed, like she was drugged. Said she kept her head down, didn't make eye contact, said she looked scared. By the time police checked it out, the room was empty. Sheets gone, trash bins bleached, no cameras, no witnesses, no one who remembered her. Val begged them to follow up, to get a warrant for the guest records, to look into the number that called her that morning. But nothing stuck. The phone was a burner, registered to no one, used twice, then tossed. I started driving past that motel every other day, just in case. Sometimes I'd sit in my car for an hour, watching the door, hoping, praying, trying to imagine what I'd do if I saw her walk out. The silence stretched on. A few more people claimed to have seen her, but they were always a few days late. A woman on a bus, a clerk at a liquor store, a Lyft driver who wasn't sure if it was really her. None of it led anywhere. Dana kept her distance. She said she felt guilty, but there wasn't much she could do. She told us she thought Alyssa left with someone she knew, that she didn't think it was anything serious. I wanted to believe her. But part of me kept thinking, how do you lose your friend like that? How do you not notice when they're spiraling? There were other messages, scammers, people pretending to be Alyssa asking for money. One account sent Val a photo of a woman tied up in a hotel room. It wasn't her, but it was enough to send Val into a full-blown panic attack. She was hospitalized 2 weeks later. The stress, the grief, her diabetes, it all caught up. Her little brother started sleeping in her room. Said the house felt too quiet. I kept driving, kept searching, kept checking corners and gas stations and alleyways I didn't want to be in. No one knows where she went after that Camry pulled away. The gas station camera caught the moment. Alyssa stepping into the passenger seat, looking back one last time like she wasn't sure. Then it pulled out of frame. That's the last proof we have that she was here. The police haven't said much. They called Justin a witness. They interviewed the gas station clerk and said the guy in the Camry wasn't a suspect at this time. That phrase makes my blood boil. Not a suspect at this time. Then when? When do we start treating it like what it is? Alyssa didn't just vanish. She was in distress, she asked for help, she was vulnerable, and someone took her. That's what I believe. Not that she ran off, not that she OD'd in some alley, not that she just needed a break from life. She was taken, and someone knows who did it. I wish I had something to end this with. A breakthrough, a name, a sliver of resolution. But I don't. I still drive past that motel sometimes. I still carry flyers in my glove compartment, just in case. Val keeps Alyssa's room the same. Her keys still hang by the door. We haven't given up, but we're tired. If you're reading this and you saw something that night, if you drove by the Shell, if you were at that Airbnb, if you work at a place where a quiet woman walks in with her head down, please say something. Even if it's small, even if it's nothing. Because one day, that nothing might be the thing that brings her home.